In the basement of the Cairo Museum, beneath the exhibit halls and the glass cases holding the artifacts of dynastic Egypt, there is a limestone block catalogued as JE 89289 that has not been on public display since 1973. It measures roughly 1.22 meters across. One face is carved with a hieroglyphic register that does not match any known scene from the standard religious canon. A visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago photographed part of its surface that year and noted in writing that the beings depicted had no equivalence in any dynastic text she had encountered across 20 years of fieldwork. That note exists. The photograph exists. The block exists. What does not exist is a single peer-reviewed paper dedicated to what is carved on it. The beings on that register are labeled with a compound glyph. Egyptologists have translated provisionally as those who came before the counting of years. That glyph does not appear anywhere in the formal dynastic canon, but what it labels shows up in 3 other locations across 2 continents, recorded by civilizations with no documented contact. 2 carry inscriptions describing the same sequence of changes to the sky, the ground, the sea, and the magnetic field. One gives a date. The date is not in the past. The carved register shows figures directing stone placement using a rod with a forked terminus held at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. A carved pillar at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by 7,000 years, shows the same instrument at the same angle. No known cultural transmission pathway connects them. A clay tablet found in southern Iraq in 1924, never assigned an accession number by any museum, describes 9 sequential changes to the observable world. The first 8 are documented in the geological and monitoring record. The 9th is happening now. All 4 records converge on a single physical process. The hieroglyphs on that sealed block are not art. They are a survey report filed by whoever came before. If suppressed archaeology, forbidden scripture, and ancient records that cannot be dismissed fascinate you, subscribe now. Every week this channel goes directly to the catalog numbers, the archived field notes, and the footnotes that never reach the mainstream. The evidence in front of you tonight has been in basement storage and restricted archives for decades. The block was excavated in 1971 from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis, the ancient burial complex south of Cairo containing some of the oldest monumental stone architecture on Earth. The excavation was led by Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer, a French Egyptologist who spent more than 7 decades at Saqqara and who is considered one of the foremost authorities on the site. His field notes, held at the French National Center for Scientific Research in Paris, describe the chamber as predating the Step Pyramid complex, not by years but by centuries. Stratigraphic analysis placed its construction before the accepted beginning of dynastic Egypt. The Cairo Museum cataloged the block in 1974 as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain. No dedicated iconographic study has been published since. The beings on that register are labeled as those who came before the counting of years, a compound glyph functioning in hieroglyphic grammar as a precise categorical designation, not a poetic flourish. The Egyptians used constructions like this to name specific classes of beings, specific cosmic roles. This one appears nowhere else in the formal dynastic canon, but what it depicts shows up at Göbekli Tepe, in a sealed chamber beneath and across 12 lines of Aramaic parchment in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum. In 2017, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch presented an analysis at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. Among his findings was a geometric observation about the forked instrument on Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe. Across the pillar's surface, in every instance, it is rendered at 33 degrees from horizontal. What his presentation did not include, because the comparison had not been made in any published forum, was the fact that the same instrument on JE 89289 appears at exactly the same angle. 2 sites, 7,000 years and 2,000 kilometers apart, with no intermediate examples in the archaeological record. The mainstream position on parallels like this is not a weak argument. Iconographic similarities across cultures are common, and angular consistency can reflect artistic convention. These positions account for a single data point in isolation. They do not account for all of them converging on the same site, the same stratigraphic layer, and the same sealed chamber. In 2019, a genomics team led by Dr. Eske Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen published an ancient DNA study in Nature Communications, covering 166 individuals from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burial sites. Table S7 of the supplementary material records that 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not resolve into any known branch of the human lineage tree. The paper flagged it as a low confidence call, possible sequencing artifact. No follow-up was conducted. The burial layer those 4 individuals came from sits directly beneath the subsidiary chamber where Lauer's team found the carved block. The tablet was found on a Tuesday in October 1924, 12 feet below the surface of a dig site in southern Iraq. The man holding the brush when it emerged was not Leonard Woolley. It was a junior excavator named Tariq Farouk, who set it on a tray without looking at it. Woolley picked it up an hour later and did not set it down again for 40 minutes. It was roughly the size of a man's palm, dense with cuneiform. What made Woolley go still was not the density, it was the script. Every other tablet from that layer was written in a form of Sumerian his team could read without difficulty. This one was not. The symbols were older, not by decades, by centuries at minimum. A tablet written in a script predating the civilization it was buried inside was not a thing that should exist. He called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 excavation seasons, then stops. The tablet does not appear in any published catalog from the excavations. It is not in the British Museum, not in the Iraq Museum. No accession number was ever assigned. A photograph by his assistant shows it on a linen cloth, partially obscured by shadow. The caption reads, "Not for reproduction." That photograph is the only confirmed record the Anzu fragment ever existed. In 1938, a linguist at the Oriental Institute in Chicago named Harold Spicer received a rubbing through a private channel he never identified. He spent 18 months on it. His notes survive under a folder labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence. They contain 12 pages of partial translation, diagrams of astronomical configurations, and a single sentence in the margin of the final page in a hand more agitated than his earlier entries. If this date is correct, it has already been set. He published nothing. He retired in 1949. The folder was not found again until 1987 when a graduate student cataloging unclaimed materials discovered it misfiled behind a cabinet. That student was Marta Holub. She spent 4 years cross-referencing Spicer's partial translation against every known corpus of Proto-Sumerian script. The Anzu fragment script matched none of them cleanly. It borrowed from all of them. In a monograph circulated to 11 colleagues in 1991, she described it as a synthesis of written forms that had not yet converged at the time they were supposedly being used separately. She left academic life in 1993. A journalist who contacted her in 2019 received a reply from her son. She had died in 2011 and asked that her research not be discussed. What survives comes from 3 sources: Spicer's partial notes, Holub's monograph, and a translation completed in 2021 by Dr. Nadia Voss at the Free University of Berlin. Voss spent 6 years reconstructing the text from high-resolution photographs of Spicer's original rubbing. She estimates she recovered approximately 70% of the original. The remaining 30% occupies the lower third, where the clay was compressed unevenly before firing. What the recovered 70% contains is written entirely in past tense. Every event is framed as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader who would come after. The Omen texts of Mesopotamia are written in conditional form. The Anzu fragment is not. The Anzu fragment records 9 sequential changes the author witnessed before the main event the tablet describes. Each is specific, carrying detail that separates it from vague prophecy. The first is the ground opening without cause in dry terrain far from rivers. Sinkholes in stable ground without rainfall preconditions have increased by over 200% in documented frequency since 2000. The geological explanation is aquifer destabilization. The tablet and the record describe the same event in different vocabularies. The second change concerns birds. The author writes they flew without direction, moved against the season, and fell while the sky was clear. In September 2020, an estimated 1 million migratory birds fell dead across the American Southwest from New Mexico to Colorado. Autopsies found no pathogen, no toxin. Internal signs were consistent with acute disorientation. The event repeated in 2021 and 2023. No consensus explanation exists. The third change is the ground speaking at night, a low-frequency vibration felt before it is heard. Animals move to higher ground before any visible sign. Beginning in 2011, unexplained low-frequency hums were documented at monitoring stations in Windsor, Ontario, Taos, New Mexico, and across the British Isles. The hum in Windsor was registered on instruments. Its source was never identified. The fourth change is the sun arriving wrong, not failing to rise, but arriving displaced from its expected position. In 2008, Inuit elders submitted testimony to the Canadian government that the sun was rising in a position different from what living memory recorded. The submission was filed. No response was issued. The fifth change is the stars moving. Not the slow procession any skywatcher understood, but a drift within a single generation. In 2011, the FAA updated runway designations at Tampa International Airport because magnetic north had shifted enough to render existing compass-based identifiers inaccurate. Airports across Europe followed. Magnetic north's movement has accelerated from roughly 10 kilometers per year in the early 20th century to over 50 kilometers per year in the last decade. The sixth change is ocean waters becoming hostile to life. Dead zones have quadrupled in total area since 1950. The tablet attributes this to the breadth of the sky weakening, a phrase Voss reads as a reference to the magnetosphere governing atmospheric chemistry. The seventh change is light appearing in the sky, where it does not belong. In May 2024, auroras were visible across the continental United States, Mexico, and as far south as northern South Africa, regions with no historical record of such displays. The scale of penetration at those latitudes reflects a magnetosphere less capable of deflecting solar charge than it was 50 years ago. The eighth change is time becoming unreliable. The seasons arrived outside expected windows. In 2016, 2019, and 2022, independent surveys of Arctic communities reported the sun rising and setting in positions that no longer matched previous generations' observations. The ninth entry is the shortest. The Sumerian reads, in Voss's translation, "The protection above is torn and the fire from beyond reaches the ground." The ESA swarm mission has tracked the South Atlantic anomaly, a region of severely weakened magnetic shielding from southern Africa across to South America. It is growing and now split into two lobes. Satellites passing through it experience unexplained failures at a rate 3 times higher than elsewhere. In 2023, operators reported a 300% increase in such failures with no traceable physical origin. The tablet says the ninth sign marks the point at which the sequence is no longer approaching. The phrasing translates closer to what follows, cannot be turned. 8 of the 9 signs are documented in the observational record. The ninth is present tense, active, and growing. The Anzu fragment describes the Earth as a body with 2 kinds of motion. Its daily rotation, which the author clearly understands, and a second slower rotation governing the position of the pole star over a much longer period. This second motion is the precession of the equinoxes, the 26,000-year cycle that shifts which star sits closest to true north. Hipparchus of Nicaea is credited with discovering precession in 127 BCE. The Anzu fragment predates that discovery by 2,000 to 3,000 years and describes the mechanism with enough accuracy that Voss used embedded star positions to independently confirm the tablet's approximate age. The tablet describes a point in this precessional cycle, at which the slow movement of the pole combines with a weakening of what the author calls the sky binding, an invisible force distinct from light, gravity, or atmospheric pressure. Voss reads it as a reference to the geomagnetic field. When the sky binding weakens past a threshold, and when the precessional alignment reaches a particular configuration, a third condition activates. Venus, Mars, and the Moon must align within 1 degree of a specific star in the constellation the Babylonians called Mushusu, the dragon, positioned in what modern astronomy maps as Draco. That 3-body conjunction within 1 degree of a single point in Draco occurs, by Voss's calculation using current ephemeris data, once every 4,700 years. The previous occurrence was approximately 2,900 BCE. The next occurs in March 2029. The alignment lasts 6 hours and 14 minutes. The tablet specifies the configuration with enough precision that Voss could pinpoint it to the 14th of March, 2029, beginning at 1922 UTC. A text written 5,000 years ago named an astronomical event accurate to the hour. The tablet does not say the conjunction causes the opening. It says the conjunction is the moment the opening already developing becomes complete. The way a crack in a wall does not fail when the crack forms, but when the last material holding the 2 sides together finally separates. What the tablet describes for the 14th of March 2029 is not catastrophe in the conventional sense. The account is almost clinical, the tone of someone recording a physical process without embellishment. The sky binding reaches its minimum. The author uses the word nanasu, a compound Voss translates as the null, the between state, the moment of no direction. Compasses do not fail in this account. They spin. The plumb lines, the shadow clocks, the star sighting tools all become simultaneously active and meaningless. Then a silence. Not the absence of sound, but the cessation of the low-frequency vibration the Earth normally produces. When that vibration stops, the author writes, you know the binding is at 0. The Anzu fragment is not the only ancient record that understood the geomagnetic field as a boundary with structural significance. A fragment of parchment no larger than a business card sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, catalog number 4, Q 203. Carbon dating places it at 150 BCE. It contains 12 lines of Enoch chapter 10 inches Aramaic from the section scholars call the Book of the Watchers. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947, 11 separate copies of Enoch surfaced, more copies than most books that remained in the Old Testament. Fragment 4Q 203 preserves a passage about the Watchers, beings Enoch names and assigns to specific observational domains. Barakel taught the signs of the stars. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, solar cycles, and timekeeping. Sariel taught the course of the moon and lunar phases. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth, geology, and mineral behavior. Kokabil taught the constellations and patterns of the sky. These are not gods in the theological sense the later church would construct. They are described in terms of disciplines, each identified by the knowledge domain they monitored and transmitted. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the standard critical edition of the Gies text at Oxford in 1983, identified the Watchers' domain assignments as a systematic catalog of observational sciences. Not mythology, a curriculum. The compound glyph on JE 89289, those who came before the counting of years, describes beings engaged in exactly this kind of systematic observation at the oldest monumental site on Earth. The parallel is structural, not incidental. Chapter 10 of the Book of Watchers records what happened when the monitoring network acted outside its function. The imprisonment described there is framed not as supernatural punishment, but as the removal of an apparatus operating for a period the text calls before the counting of years. That compound appears again, the same designation on the limestone block in Cairo. The Gies manuscripts preserved by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church use the phrase "those who tracked the sky binding" at the point in chapter 10 where the Aramaic fragments become too damaged for direct comparison. Voss, working independently on the Anzu fragment, encountered the same phrase in the cuneiform and cross-referenced it to the Gies tradition in a footnote of her 2021 translation. She noted the parallel without elaborating. She did not need to. Woolley did not include in his institutional field notes what he wrote in his personal journal on the 14th of October 1924. That leather-bound record passed to his niece after his death and then to a university library in Edinburgh, catalogued in 1978 without understanding what it contained. The relevant entry states that the clay sealing the chamber entrance, where the Anzu fragment was found, had been applied from within, and that there was no mechanism by which a person who applied it from within could have exited. Someone went into that chamber, sealed it from the inside, left the tablet on the floor, and waited for what they knew was coming above them. The flood layer above the chamber is dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE, the same period the tablet's astronomical content corresponds to. The Eastern Mediterranean archaeological record from this period shows sudden mass abandonment of coastal and river valley settlements. Entire cities left mid-occupation, tools in place, fires unextinguished. Climate shift, military pressure, and resource depletion have never accounted for the simultaneity of this movement across geographically separated regions with no known communication network between them. The Anzu fragment offers a different account. The people who moved did not move because conditions had become difficult. They moved because they understood the 9 signs and had received, through a chain of transmission, the record does not preserve, instructions about where to go. High ground, stable bedrock, distance from coastlines. The tablet's surviving geographical principles were precise enough that Voss was able to map them against modern topographic data. The regions described show elevated population density in the record beginning shortly after 2900 BCE. The fragment was not written as a warning to the people alive when it was composed. They already knew. It was written for whoever would come later, after the flood layer was deposited, after the city was rebuilt and buried in its turn, after everything above cycled through formations and erasures. It was written for whoever would be alive when the processional clock completed its next turn, and the 9 signs appeared again in sequence. The tablet's final line, which Voss marks as the only passage she is fully confident in because the symbols are large and deeply pressed, translates as, "You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open." The author sealed the chamber in 2900 BCE and left that sentence for whoever came next. 4 independent records, separated by thousands of years and thousands of kilometers, converge on a single physical process. Shows beings labeled as pre-dynastic monitors, using an instrument carved at 33 degrees, the same angle found at the oldest ritual site on Earth. A clay tablet from southern Iraq, never catalogued by any museum, describes 9 observable changes to the sky: the birds, the ground, the ocean, and the magnetic field in past tense eyewitness language, followed by a 3-body astronomical conjunction dated to the hour. Fragment 4, Q203, preserves an Aramaic account of a monitoring network named by domain, whose knowledge areas correspond exactly to the disciplines needed to identify and track a geomagnetic reversal cycle. And 4 individuals buried in the same stratigraphic layer as the carved block in Cairo carry a Y chromosome haplogroup that does not resolve onto the human lineage tree. The mainstream positions on each of these individually are reasonable. Iconographic parallels do not require contact. Sequencing noise produces artifacts. Ancient tablets can be misread. Each objection is fair, applied to a single data point. None of them holds when all 4 converge on the same site, the same period, and the same physical event. The South Atlantic anomaly is not a theory. The ESA swarm mission has been tracking it since 2013. It is growing and split into 2 lobes, a development not anticipated at this stage. Satellite failure rates inside it are rising. Magnetic north is moving at a rate more than 5 times faster than at the start of the 20th century. The FAA updated runway designations in 2011 because of it. Arctic communities are recording solar positions that no longer match inherited maps. 1 million birds fell in the American Southwest in a single month with no identified cause. These are not interpretations. They are observations in the live monitoring record. Dr. Nadia Voss is still working on the damaged 30% of the Anzu fragment, using the highest resolution images available from Spicer's original rubbing. The lower third, where the clay compressed unevenly before firing, may or may not yield more content. She has not said publicly what she expects to find. JE89289 remains in the basement storage of the Cairo Museum. The genomic anomaly in Table S7 of the 2019 Willerslev study has not been addressed in any follow-up publication. The Scan Pyramids radar surveys conducted in 2018 identified at least 3 sealed subsurface chambers beneath the Saqqara pre-dynastic complex, whose dimensions and depth are inconsistent with any known architectural feature at the site. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities classified them as structurally sensitive, pending further geotechnical assessment. Excavation permits have not been issued. The assessment has been pending since 2018. No timetable has been given. One record was sealed underground 5,000 years ago by someone who sealed themselves inside with it. Another was carved in stone and buried beneath Egypt's oldest monument. A third was copied 11 times and hidden in desert caves. The fourth is live instrument data from a satellite array in orbit since 2013. They all describe the same thing. The only question the tablet says is left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open.